and welcome to the David Goodman Reality and Truth Show. My name is Vanita Lambert, and I have the honor of hosting this show. And I have two very special guests, and we have some really important information to share with you today. And that is the purpose of this platform that David Goodman left for us. So I am going to introduce here, we have Miss Jean Rabineau. She is an attorney at law, and she's the Register of Voters for Trumbo. Thank you so much for being here, Jean. And then we have Miss Laurel Anderson, League of Women of the Voters of Bridgeport. And thank you so much for coming. And the information that we're going to share with you is we need to get out the votes. That is the single most important thing. So this information is recorded on YouTube. Please share it with everyone, share the links with everyone throughout the country, and especially in Connecticut. So without any further ado, ladies, please just, let us know exactly what we need to do, okay? Let our audience know how important it is to vote. This has got to be the most important presidential election of all time of the world.
By far, by far.
By far. So you want to get your voice heard.
Vanita, thank you so much for bringing us on today. We're thrilled to be here. Both Jean and I have been members of the League of Women Voters for a good many years, probably more than we care to admit. And it's an organization that cares passionately about voting and voting rights, and making sure that people are involved in their government. So, we're very happy to come here today. I'd like to just reiterate to everybody how hard fought some of our current rights have been. Under the Constitution, way back when, certain groups of people were given the right to vote, but not everyone.
That's right.
And then incrementally in 1868, black men were given the right to vote, but not women. Not women of any group. And it wasn't until 1920, my grandmothers were born not having the right to vote. If you think about it, how stunning that is. So when people don't vote now, I'm like, are you kidding me? This was so hard fought for women that went to jail and were physically abused and ridiculed and harassed, and got us the right to vote.
Right, and so don't take that for granted.
Correct.
Go out and vote. That's your only voice. I mean, we're just regular citizens. We're not going to make a difference unless we vote on the local levels, presidential, every single level.
Yeah.
We have to vote. That's our right.
So over the years, before the 1960s, there were laws enacted. And to our shame in Connecticut, as I was doing a little research for visiting you today, I know you have a reach outside of Connecticut, but we're in Connecticut, and I just wanted to share with you what I consider to be shameful history of Connecticut when it comes to voting.
Wow.
Back in 1811, believe it or not, 1818, other New England states enfranchised black men. Not Connecticut.
Not Connecticut.
Not Connecticut. We were one of only 12 states in the entire country who forced the literacy rules until the 1960s, when the Voting Rights Act passed. Now, if you think about it, we're always considered to be this very progressive, very forward-thinking state, and yet we have a history like that, right? Who knew?
I thought.
Who knew?
Not when it comes to voting.
No.
And in fact, we were one of the last states in the entire United States to implement early voting, which we only did this year. So we are not progressive when it comes to the vote.
Which is such a shame when you think about it. We're so far ahead of the curve on other things, and not here.
So what I heard was black men, okay, which we have a shortage. I think that is the category that votes the least, and we were the last one to have the right to do that. So that information alone should motivate you, should inspire you to get out and vote. People died, people fought for it, you were deprived. Just vote because it's your right. find a reason to vote. Listen to all of the candidates, whether it's women's rights, abortions, or, the economy, whatever it is. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I wish I could, but I won't. But, find out what's important to you and vote for it, because that's the only way you're going to get your voice heard.
I have a couple of things to add to that.
Please.
One is that in Connecticut, I am proud to say that the voting percentage among black men is growing.
Thank you.
The voting percentage among Hispanics is still lower than I think we would like. And some of that is because of discrimination at the polling place. The thing I would like to say is that even if you don't feel very connected to the rights and obligations that you have as a citizen, if you don't vote, your community doesn't get government funding. What governors and legislators and presidents and everybody who is elected looks at is, if I repair this road, will the people in this neighborhood remember me? And does this neighborhood turn out to vote?
Exactly.
And if you don't vote, you don't get the services.
So don't complain if you don't vote. And when you say discrimination against most of the Hispanics at the polling, what do you mean by that? That their license address is incorrect, or how are they discriminated against?
I have known of cases, thank heavens not in Trumbull, where voters who are first-time voters and are necessarily not expected to know their rights are simply told that their privileges haven't matured and they can't vote in this election yet.
Well, please share their rights.
The Voting Rights Act passed in Connecticut last year. Nationally, it kind of got stripped in 2013 when the Supreme Court started taking away portions of the Voting Rights Act. But in Connecticut, they passed it last year. It went into effect in July of last year. And one of the things that is now mandated is that if you have a certain percentage of your population that speaks something other than English, you must provide ballots in that language.
Oh, okay.
So now, if you are in there are 10 municipalities in Connecticut that are required to have English and Spanish.
Good.
But there could be populations in other larger cities that reach that threshold. So you might then be able to go to the polls and get a ballot in your native language to make it much easier, more comfortable for you to be able to vote and understand what the ballot is saying. So I think that is a huge step forward for us.
Humongous.
Huge.
Oh my God. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it also stops municipalities from redistricting according to that kind of population census. So you can no longer look at the race of people in a district. You have to look at the census, which is what we did a couple of years ago. That's all you can look at is hard numbers, not to discriminate by breaking up a neighborhood of perhaps there's a bunch of Cambodians or an overwhelming portion of a neighborhood. Well, they could have cut that right in half, which dilutes the value of that vote. So you can't do that anymore. You have to go, and there are times you have to go to the Secretary of State to get the right to redistrict like that. You can't cut back on polling places. You can't discriminate against certain privileged protected groups anymore the way they used to be able to. And there are certain municipalities in Connecticut that would have been just like places in the South where you had to go and get permission to change your polling places.
So give me an example. Give me an example of that.
I don't actually have the 8 towns, but they were found to be in violation of some of the stuff they were doing. And it may have been, and I'm not 100% sure, but it may certainly have been what Jean was discussing, that because they were new voters, new citizens, they didn't quite understand their full rights. The fact that you don't need to walk in with a driver's license to vote.
I didn't know that either. I always, make sure I have my driver's license, because there were rumors flying around the last election that people, especially in the South, were being turned away because they lived, I guess they had their address an address on the form, but their driver's license had something different and they didn't have it changed on the back. There were just all kind of craziness going on.
Yeah.
So.
But, you know, again, because you're not just in Connecticut, every single state has its own rules about identification. But in Connecticut, when you go into the poll, they are not supposed to say, may I have your driver's license? They're supposed to say, may I have your ID?
Okay.
And
it could be any type of ID.
All right. Let me talk about what you can and can't bring at the polls. Any ID, driver's license, non-driver ID, work ID, VA membership, whatever it is, as long as it has your name and photo, or anything with your name and signature, so a signed credit card will do. Very, very low odds that you're going to give your credit card to someone else to vote in your name. If you have some document that proves who you are, that is mailed to your house at your current address, you bring it with you even if your driver's license is out of date and has the wrong address. So that even if the license doesn't have your name on the flip side, your address on the flip side, it will have something else that proves you're where you're supposed to be. Actually, you're not supposed to have to prove your residence at the polls at all.
Just who you are.
Just who you are, because my office staff in the registrar's office and every registrar in the 169 towns in Connecticut is supposed to check that before they put your name on the rolls in the first place. The one exception to all of this is in federal election years, which this is. If you are a new voter and you've never shown photo ID at the polls before, and you didn't show photo ID when you registered, you have got to be able to have provable ID at the polls, preferably photo, although name and signature will do. People who have previously shown ID, if they forget and they show up at the polls the next year without any proof, they can sign an affidavit saying, this is who I am, this is where I live, and we'll take it. The other thing is that you don't need a driver's license or a DMV ID to register unless you're registering online. If you're online, you do have to have something from the DMV because that's how they link.
So let me ask you this. Does that rule out homeless people?
Makes it harder for homeless people.
How can someone that became homeless vote?
They can, there are certain charities that maintain homeless shelters. And they can use, the homeless person can use the shelter address as the residence. Okay. It doesn't have to be a permanent residence. It's just where you intend to be reachable on election day.
Okay.
So you can use an accommodation address. The real problem with homeless people, quite frankly, is getting them to the polls at all. As you can well imagine, not every person who is homeless is even aware of when an election is going to take place. It makes it more difficult to reach them.
Some of them are, though. A lot of homeless people, it's so easy to become homeless.
Yes.
If you're living paycheck to paycheck and you have a child, and I've seen it happen to people, and you're renting from a landlord that sells the house, and you need to come up with 3 months, of down payment for your rent, you can become homeless.
Easily.
So there's a lot of people that are aware of, that's aware of voting, but still become homeless very quickly, especially during COVID.
Yes.
And there's just so many situations. I just like to put it out there. If you're homeless, how can you get an ID? I know that's not the most important thing, not a top priority for homeless folks, but they have a voice. They are people. They are citizens. And you need to understand that you can exercise your right when you vote, and it might make a difference.
It certainly might. I will also say that not knowing about when an election is going to take place is not limited to the homeless. In Trumbull, we send out postcards as reminders to voters, and you would be surprised at the number of people, housed people, not homeless people, who call the office and say, when is it and what are the hours?
I'm one of them. I am one of them. I grew up on the east side in Bridgeport, and I thought the presidential voting was the most important voting ever. And I learned later local voting is far more important
Yes, it
than
is.
that. I had no idea, you know, when, exactly what you just said, because that was not a priority in my single home. You know, my mom with 7 kids. Voting was not a priority. Knowing when to vote was not a priority.
You know, and I think it's something the league will probably try to drum home a little bit more in the future. While the national elections are flashy and, you know, they make TV,
Yeah.
municipal elections are the things that determine how good your school system is.
Exactly. How much money you're going to get.
Exactly. If your roads are paved, if the potholes filled so you don't break a spring in your car. You know, those are the kinds of things that impact you every single day, and that so few people show up for municipal elections breaks my heart, because those are the elections that impact you every single day of your life.
Yeah.
Your garbage collection, how many police do you have? Your fire department, is your fire department fully, you know, got all the equipment that they need, and is it new?
And are they staffed properly?
Yeah.
And can they make it to your home if there is a fire?
Right.
Exactly.
And also the other thing is, don't ignore state on this. State funding provides, especially in our cities, a fair percentage of the school budget. If you don't vote for people who are going to make sure that that money gets there, you will suddenly find your school's in terrible shape.
Exactly.
Now,
Here's the problem: getting the information to people like where I was, my mother, Father Panic Village. How do you get that information out? If you don't have the information, you cannot take advantage of any of the benefits. So that's where I see the problem. I'm on the inside looking out now. So we never knew anything about voting locally. There was never any information about that. So that's, you know, we got to find a way to reach everyone, even homeless people, pass out flyers or what have you, to, you know, to get them the information. A struggling mom with 2 kids working full-time and part-time to pay the rent. She's not, you know, searching when am I, you know, when's the next election. The information has to be thrown to her.
Right.
And if you're not registered as a Democrat or a Republican, then you don't get that card in the mail that I get all the time. I don't think. Yeah, I could be wrong.
in Trumbull, you will get a card.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's why I want to backtrack.
Yeah.
Now you will, you know. So
Yes,
that's...
but not for the primary. Bear in mind that in Connecticut, the parties make the rules and who can vote.
Yeah, they're closed.
They're closed primaries. If you're an unaffiliated voter, you have no say in who the candidates are going to be.
Which is it's sort of a shame in some respects, and I've been reading things of late that people are getting a little concerned that we have, as in municipalities, have no control over these primaries.
Yeah.
We can't open them up to everybody, and yet in Trumbull, 50% of the voters are not affiliated with the party. They get to pay their taxes, pay for these primaries, but they don't get to vote in them.
Wow.
So, you know, when you think about it, there's, what the heck is that all about? But, you know, it does happen in a lot of places that the primaries are closed.
I will say that there are states where they let Republicans vote in Democratic primaries and Democrats vote in Republican primaries. I personally am not in favor of that. It seems to me that if you've got a party affiliation, you should vote in that party's primary. But if you're unaffiliated, I wish the state would let the unaffiliated vote in the party of their choice.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, that should fall right under the First Amendment.
Yep, because if you think about it, those are the
Exactly.
those basically the only 2 candidates you're going to have available to you in November.
Exactly.
And yet you have no say.
Wow. So what are some of the other voting rights that we may have missed, some of the obvious things that we may not know about, like the ones you just mentioned?
Handicapped.
Yes.
We already talked about
okay.
that. There is now special technology available in every voting precinct in Connecticut, where if you have trouble either seeing what is going to be a readable ballot in front of you, there is machinery available that will read the ballot and mark the ballot for you if you have trouble holding a pen.
Good.
So that if you want to vote at the polls with the secrecy that you get there, there is equipment, and the moderator at the poll or one of the assistant registrars will help a handicapped voter do it. The other thing is that if you feel you need assistance, you can bring in a helper of your choice, so long as it is not a politician who's running in that district unless it's a family member.
I'm sure they would love to help.
Right, I'm sure they would too. All right, or your boss at work, or your union shop steward.
Okay.
Okay, because too much pressure can be exerted on a voter that way.
Exactly.
But outside of those, you can bring a family member or a friend to help you navigate your way through the ballot.
Okay. That's great because, I am a Medicare insurance agent and life insurance agent, and I have some vision impaired clients. And, well, the one in particular that I'm thinking about, she goes through the senior center to get her taxes done and a whole bunch of other things. But for me, and I'm going off course here a little bit, I set it up so that she cannot receive anything through the computer, like her Social Security. Nothing can be done online, because if so, it's a fraud. There's no way she could see it. She reads Braille and everything like that, but if somebody opens up an account online, it's not her. So you have to put certain things in place.
So we also have something in Connecticut, and I know most registrars don't want to promote this because it's really a kind of a one-off. There's a thing called curbside voting. So if for instance, if you find yourself on the day of the election not able to get out of your car and walk into the polling place, 2 assistant registrars, 1 from each party, will come out to your car, take your ID, get you checked into the checker book, bring out your ballot, you vote in your car, and they'll together, and again, both parties, so they're overseeing one another.
Okay.
So no, it's totally...
No hanky-panky.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about the system in Connecticut is there's always two. And always from opposing parties, so there's no collusion, there's no, oh, I'll look the other way. No. It's right down the middle. So if you find yourself on voting day, like you were fine the day before election, so you weren't going to vote absentee or you weren't going to vote early. But come election morning, it's like, holy mackerel, I can get to the car, but I don't think I can make it from the car inside. And then to have to wait in the line.
Right.
You can ask for curbside voting.
I didn't know that either. There's a lot I don't know.
I mean, this can't be your way that you vote every year.
Exactly,
I
right.
think that's why it's not really promoted, because it's really not a drive-in or a drive-through vote.
Voting, yeah.
And it takes a long time. But I will say this, the one person that I know who did use curbside, it wasn't that she was too ill to come in, but she didn't want to infect the other voters. She knew she had a contagious illness.
Okay, that's a
And
good
she
point.
called
If
us
you
to
have
the-
COVID or something.
Yeah.
She called us to the car, and we were happy not to have her in line. The other thing somebody can do is, if they can make it to the poll, but they can't stand in line for a long period of time, they are entitled to walk to the front of the line and request from one of the polling officials the ability to break in early so that they can get priority.
Nice.
And most people are usually very gracious about allowing someone who has an obvious issue with standing to cut in front of them.
Oh, and there's plenty of people. Let's talk a little bit about early voting. That's something new in our state that we just got.
This is our expert.
This year. Early voting, if you're going to be out of town, or if you're, please.
Early voting is an absolute wonderful thing for people who want to vote without putting their ballot in the mail, but who are not going to be able to make it to the polls on a Tuesday.
Okay.
And they have a certain number of days before each primary and a longer number of days before the general election, where you can walk into your town's central location. In Bridgeport, there are maybe 2 of them, but in Trumbull, it's City Hall, Town Hall.
Okay.
And you can check in, get a ballot and a ballot envelope, fill it out right then and there, and put it in the, it's not the tabulator, but it's a ballot box.
Okay.
That's available. The ballots are stored until election night. They're counted.
Oh, okay.
And they are securely stored.
Oh, yeah. Fireproof, tamper-proof, locked.
Yeah.
In Trumbull, I hate to admit this, we use a jail cell. Trumbull Town
It's an
Hall.
old jail cell.
Trumbull Town Hall used to be police headquarters, and there was a jail cell in the basement of Town Hall, securely padlocked, iron bars, the whole works, and that's where the ballots
Gotta
go.
secure it. It's so important. I mean,
yeah.
There's a lot of things going on. I don't want to get into any detail, but that information should be secured, and your vote should count for the candidate of your selection.
Absolutely.
So it looks like there will be a ballot question. Is it in November?
They're saying so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
On whether to allow for absentee voting without any excuses, because we still have excuses. You have to be out of town. It's against your religion. It's whatever it is.
Sick or something.
Yeah.
So how do you prove that you're sick? Anybody could say, I took a at-home COVID test and I have COVID. But, so we need to eliminate that, just like most companies did at work. Instead of having, you got to take a sick day, it's just PTO.
But unfortunately, in Connecticut, in some ways, the voting processes are baked into our Constitution. So it has to be exactly what it was 2 years ago when we voted on early voting. Mm-hmm. And because it passed, now we this year have early voting. But it's the same. It's going to be the same process where a majority of people have to vote in favor of amending the Constitution, and then it goes back to the legislature then they can play and they can come up with changes to the absentee process.
So much red tape.
Seriously.
Well,
so
the
much red
funny
tape.
thing is, the thing that's really a problem with the absentee ballots now is not the lack of proof. If somebody claims that they're disabled or they're ill, I think we're going to take it on faith,
right.
All right? Because you're swearing this under penalties of perjury. Mm-hmm. But the fact remains that we have people who probably would have qualified for absentee ballots even under the old tight rules, and they don't want to misrepresent their status.
Okay.
I've had patients who were pregnant and about to go into the hospital, and they're not willing to say that they're ill or disabled because pregnancy is not an illness and it's not a disability.
That's right.
And we've had people who have been afraid to fill out the absentee ballot form. So I shouldn't say this, but I just hope that this thing passes. I hope it passes.
Say it. Listen, this has been wonderful having you guys on. We have about 30 seconds left.
Wow.
What would you like to say to our audience? It goes by really fast.
Well, again, I am so happy that you invited us to come today. I hope we have offered some new information to everybody, and that they find it valuable and that they'll come out and vote.
And I hope everybody go out and vote and share this information. And thank you, beautiful ladies, for coming on, sharing this information. And I certainly learned a lot.
Vanita,
so
it's a pleasure.
This is the David Goodman Reality and Truth Show, and we're on your side.